If there's any game in recent times that's been living rent-free in my head because of recent reflections and the events of my life, it would be Peak, a game that recently took a subsection of the internet by storm. Released on June 16th, 2025, Peak is a cooperative climbing video game developed and published by Crab and Landfall. As is with most indie hits, I'm not sure either company expected the overwhelming response to their slapstick climbing game. Crab, after starting a new project and feeling burnout, opted to cancel the project and to return to something that would bring the spark back. A reminder of why the studio was making video games at all. That something was Peak. After a month-long game jam with Landfall where they worked non-stop and with no expectations, the game released for a mere $8 US. In about a week, the game sold 1 million copies, and in a little under a month, 4.5 million copies. All of that, off of what was merely a diversion before their next project. The goal of the game is quite straightforward, similar to how the old Mario games were. Get from point A to point B. However, instead of going right, the goal in Peak is to go upward. Further upward. And even further upward. And even further upward, and, well, you get the point. Until you finally reach the peak and light a flare to get rescued. Or, in the less good case, the elements or your own arrogance claim you. Or you just make a bad mistake. Or your companions screw you, but I digress. I don't think Peak is a particularly impressive game, not from a creative perspective, not from a technical perspective, and certainly not from a graphical perspective, and yet, there's a beauty in its simplicity. It just makes me keep coming back for more. Between the environment, which changes every day, to the ability to read the landscape and chart a viable path, to making snap judgments that could be the difference between completion or failure. Do I keep this item that would help us climb, or keep more food? Should we take this useless item that will let us get an achievement? Do we gamble on a route that looks quite difficult, but would be easier to climb once we get over the hump? When should this tool be used? When should it not be used? Is it worth taking the time to search an area for potentially useful items with the danger quickly approaching? Across dozens and dozens of runs, hundreds of variations of the questions I just mentioned, with some proving to be small decisions that snowballed into our catastrophic downfalls. It's almost astounding how many rounds of this simple game I've played. I think one of its greatest strengths is its accessibility of play and low barrier of entry. It doesn't have a wide range of gameplay or mechanics, but what is presented is quite intuitive and easy to learn, with the UI being quite clean and easy to decipher. For example, what type of damage is taking up a part of your stamina bar, and by extension, your health. But the biggest boon of all, of course, a chance to play, a chance to experience the journey with friends. Maybe you don't believe me. Perhaps you think I'm being rather anecdotal in my thoughts. After all, in our day and age, there are an overwhelming amount of multiplayer games. I admittedly chafe when I see shows resolve their challenges through the power of friendship, too. It's no secret I do a lot of thinking about the idea of friendship and what it means to be a friend, and the necessity of human relationship. Science and studies support this conclusion, that friendship affects so much in terms of our mental health and even physical health. Protective of our health, one might say. Relational insurance, if you remember that term, which I mentioned in another video, Somewhere to Belong. When I first started writing this video, I was planning on just talking about Peak, and some of my reflections on it. Fairly quick and short. But the more I've read, thought, and digested, despite all the times I've talked about it throughout my videos and in my channel, the topic came back to me again. We're wired to be social creatures. Folks far more knowledgeable and eloquent than I have made a variety of different videos, links down in the description if you're interested, about the psychology and science of friendship and relationship, its effects on the individual and collective society, and what it's like in our current day and age. Jared Henderson's video, Why We're Lonely, Derek Thompson's thoughts in The Great Friendship Collapse inside the Antisocial Century, Richard Reeves' The Friendship Recession, they all got me thinking. It's clear that there are concerns, between the WHO declaring loneliness to be a global health concern, and the US Surgeon General declaring that the health impact of being socially disconnected is similar to the effect of smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Many have said that we are in a loneliness epidemic. Jared marks a strong distinction between two things which generally sound similar. Solitude, which is a choice, and in many cases could be admirable or perhaps good for you, versus loneliness, which the philosopher Hannah Arendt describes as the experience of being deserted by all human companionship. This certainly coincides with something I've observed in my own life, as I'm sure you have as well. There's a distinct lack of third spaces, or places that aren't home, or the workplace. As Jared notes that we've stopped doing things together. That despite all of the technology that enables us to have instantaneous connections to anyone, at any time, and almost anywhere, levels of anxiety, isolation, and social loneliness only seem to be growing. I'm not here to necessarily discuss why we're in a friendship recession, a loneliness epidemic, or in the antisocial century. I think the videos I've mentioned do an incredible job of that, and they say it far better than I could. But what is clear is that there is a problem, and no one has a catch-all solution or a quick fix. I find one of the most difficult things nowadays is to find a consistent companion when I'm playing something multiplayer related. Between rising costs, the difficulties and consistent changes of life, and commitment, it's really hard to get a few friends, nay, just one friend, to agree to buy a game and play it with you in a semi-frequent manner. And more so when you're the one who owns it. It feels as if you're in sales or marketing as you attempt to sell them on the game. And you don't even know if they'll actually like it once they start playing. I think a combination of the factors I mentioned earlier, like its low barrier of entry, simplistic gameplay, general ability to generate hijinks, and its extremely low price point contributed significantly to its blossoming sales numbers. While gamers probably led the charge in terms of sales, even folks who haven't or rarely play games found it fairly intuitive and easy to pick up. Peak cleared the price barrier of entry fairly easily, both on an individual and group level. Not to mention the time commitment, which has been around 2 hours for me and my companions. You can play this game alone. I suppose for the intrepid adventurer, they might even consider having companions to be an impediment to their progress. And in some cases, while true, the opposite is also true. For example, maybe you're trying to climb somewhere you otherwise wouldn't have been able to get to. It's a good thing your friend is there to throw down a rope or pull you up. Or when they give you a perspective or a suggestion you would have never thought of, and everyone gets to the next step upward. Like my good friend Kevin has said many times throughout our escapades. When in doubt, look straight up. Experiencing Peak with a friend makes the game so much more rewarding. Peak really makes it feel like your companions are doing monumental or Herculean feats, even in the smallest of moments. Pulling you up a rock, making the climb first and preparing the way with pitons or rope or chain. Dropping you food or medical supplies. Removing cactus needles. Throwing dynamite away. Or carrying you unconscious on their back. You celebrate their triumphs as if they were yours, and jump back in for another round when you've failed. For the allure of climbing the mountain and escaping together seems like such a difficult task. Yet, you failed together, and thus resolved to try again. Together. In fact, it was a little over 30 hours until I finally got to the summit and was rescued. But yet I felt somewhat unfulfilled. After all, my companion didn't make it on board with me physically, instead accompanying me as a ghost and giving me advice as I made my way upward, towards the light. It was around the 37-hour mark when I finally left the accursed island with a friend. And that feeling. That experience has remained with me far, far after the helicopter flew into the distance and the credits rolled. A lot's been happening in my life recently. And I know, I say that in almost every single one of these sections when I talk about my life, but these 2 months have been unprecedented. And quite honestly, a period of my life that started an entire new section in my journal. Even though I had just started a new section 2 months ago when I made the decision to move again. Between news that has permanently altered my world, my first major injury I've ever suffered, adapting to a new living situation, trying to find friends and community, general life and moving logistics, and to top it all off, a memorable sprint through the airport with a complete stranger as we tried to catch a connecting flight. My life has unfolded in a manner I couldn't possibly have predicted. And so the experience of playing Peak meant more to me than just some funny putty people making their way up a mountain. I hadn't watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy in quite some time, but upon a recent rewatch, I picked up on something that helped me wrap up my thoughts. There's a scene in The Lord of the Rings where Frodo can't go on any further, and Sam picks him up and continues carrying him up the volcanic slope, which seemed unusually analogous to Peak. Does Peak have some grand message or powerful themes like The Lord of the Rings? I wouldn't say so. Probably most people picked it up because it was cheap and an easy generator of laughter, but for me, Peak felt like the very essence of that relational insurance piece that I've been talking about, experiencing and observing in a very real and tangible way within my life and the lives of others. When hunger gnawed its way through me and sapped me of my strength, they'd bring me food. When I was injured and broken from dangers I could and could not see, they'd offer me something to patch up my wounds. When there wasn't a path forward, they'd suggest using a tool to get us where we wanted to go. When I couldn't get up to a spot that they could due to a variety of factors, like the weight in my backpack, they'd reach out a helping hand and make a previously inaccessible climb possible. When trying to decide what to take and leave behind, they'd offer advice based on our journey, thus far, and what was to come. When I was in need of a laugh, they'd never fail to deliver. Peak's creation mirrors how my life has been the last 5 years, of trying and expecting to go or land somewhere, and ending up somewhere entirely unexpected, whether by location or life events. So, after all of that babbling, I think it can only come to one conclusion. 2 is better than 1.